Hello, good morning, and welcome to the Comics Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club, Kids Edition, the best edition. I love the Kids Club for October of 2023. If you're sometime in the future, hi, welcome. We've got a really good book this month, and it's a great book for October too because it's nicely spooky and all that. And it is this right here. It is Things in the Basement by Ben Hatke, and Ben is right there. Well, he's not right there.
Oh, hi.
Professional show business, love it. Oh man, welcome, Ben. How are you, man?
I'm good. I was sitting here ready to come on, and the wind blew my studio door open, and it was banging in this October wind, so I rushed off to close that.
No problem.
Otherwise, I'm doing great. Good morning.
Excellent. Yeah, great book, man. I thought that this book was both like it had a lot of heart and a lot of soul and a lot of action, but it's also really smart about sort of art history, mythology, and the part that's beautiful about it, in my opinion, is that it's not lectury, right? Like most of the time when it's art history and mythology, it's very like, and here's things that happened, whereas you just weave it kind of seamlessly into the background, and I really appreciated that.
Yeah, that my friend Zach Giolongo, who did the coloring for this book, it was really fun because he hadn't seen a lot of it beforehand. He's one of the most fantastic illustrators I know, but he was like, we were chatting about it one time, and he was like halfway through his coloring, and he was like, I really like this book because it's like walking around in your brain.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff in a lot of the art history in the book is, as Milo journeys down into the basement, in a sense, he's going back through art history, kind of back in time through it all. But it's also like a little bit of it's also like greatest hits for me. The paintings that he comes in contact with are my, like a list of my favorites from the National Gallery that I get. And like the sculpture, I just like all my favorite sculptures. Let's cram them all into one room. Some you would know from history, and others friends sculptures, things like this that you would maybe never know or had seen before. So there's a lot of like as well, deeply personal little connections and bits of art, and stuff that's touched my lives in different ways. Like he pulls out the Vitruvian Man at one point, and it's just like it didn't need to speak out in the story so much as just kind of like be there and kind of try to enrich it. And definitely a part of the process that made the book a lot of fun for me personally to kind of draw and put together. Yeah.
And it feels to me like, that almost certainly the audience is probably not going to recognize most of these things while they're reading it right now. But 10 years from now, when they come back to the book, they'll be like, oh, like get it on a whole different level.
Yes. Yeah. That's the hope. And also that, parents will pick up the book and look at it and say like, oh, wait, I recognize that. That's, Ginevra da Vinci from, that Leonardo painted or whatever it is, little things that they can find. So yeah, that's definitely part of it. Also, like more and more as I've been doing storytelling, I've tried to, let me think how to say it, keep elements of the story subconscious, like almost not like early on. I was maybe more of an architect storyteller where I was very, very anxious about structure and like what everything is. And like lately I've been able to, or been more interested in not questioning too many aspects of the story, like especially visually, letting a lot of things happen visually and just let them be subconscious. And maybe find out later why certain things are in there. So yeah.
Well, let me that seems like a good segue to my formal first question, which is I ask this question of everybody, and it's why comics? you're clearly a talented artist. You know how to tell a story. Comics are a very work intensive thing. It's not easy to do comics. So what is it about the form, the medium, that thrills you, that excites you, that gets you up in the morning to go, I can't wait to hit this page and do it? Why comics?
And it keeps me coming back. It's a good question because I've been doing more prose work and finding and really grappling with the differences between that. Right. One thing that because comics is very, you're right, very labor intensive form of storytelling. But yesterday I was at an event at the Library of Congress in conversation with Jerry Spinelli, who's he's about like 80 now, and so he's has all these novels under his belt, and we were kind of talking about the difference between prose and comics, and there is there is a delight in working with just words, where if you want to change a scene to a rainy day, you push backspace, 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 and then you just type it in. It was a driving rain, whatever it is. And that seems so luxurious, right? To be able to do that, to be able to change the whole flavor of a scene with a few keystrokes. Fine. But I'm so excited about like gestural storytelling, about the idea of body language and being able to use that. Body language is a universal language, a universal human language. So many spoken languages, but we all know that like this is what afraid looks like. It's universal, right? And so in this conversation yesterday, I was like, that was the easy part of prose, but the hard thing is that in comics, with a little bit of body movement, I can do this. One of my characters can do that.
Yeah.
And you nail a whole range of if you can master those small gestures, the big gestures, you can get so much storytelling in such a small space, so simply. That's one thing that keeps me coming back to comics. Another thing is that it's like being able to shoot whatever kind of movie you want with no special effect, with not no special, but with an unlimited special effects budget, right? If you want to shoot a scene in outer space, if you can draw it, that's you've got it, you know? So that's another thing that brings me back. And also the sort of confluence of words and pictures together is kind of maybe a sweet spot for me. So because my dad is an architect, and my mom is a humongous reader and was a school teacher, and so we always had, like, there were a lot of books and stories in the house growing up. But then with my dad, whenever you'd ask a question, he actually had the pens in his front pocket with little note cards. He was always very comfortable explaining something with a pen and a drawing, right? So very early on, that became sort of a language for me. This idea of being able to put your thoughts on paper in terms of drawing. That keeps me coming back.
Yeah, let me ask a question, because you say you've been working with prose a lot more lately. There's a real difference in comics and prose. That prose, you have to describe everything that's going on. You can't you can't not show something. Whereas in comics, I would argue that much of the wonder of comics is in the gutters, right? It's the space between the panels. So you can show one image and you can have a different image, and they don't necessarily have to be, I held your hand to get you from this place to the other.
Right. Yeah, no, that sense of that sense of inference, and that sense of like
audience participation as well.
Exactly. And this, like I do a lot of school visits, and this is one of the of the three, I share kind of like three pillars of visual storytelling, and that is one of them. This idea of the like storytelling being a relational kind of activity, and it's the storyteller and the audience, and our brains like to do a bit of the work,
Yeah.
right? And our brains, part of the pleasure of the reader is, and it's a subconscious pleasure, it's not even a realized pleasure, is making these little connections as we jump along, and this transcends comics. Every time a scene switches in a movie and you're not confused, really the same thing's happening. But comics, you get it right down on the page, and it happens in prose as well, but really, like, it's so delightfully right there in the comics medium, and you can, and by juxtaposing strange images one next to another, therein lies many of the jokes in comic strips and things like this. So, so yeah, that's definitely another one. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you study comics in school, illustration in general? Like, what's your background there?
Yeah, no, my undergraduate, I just made comics all through it all, and my undergraduate was in history, and it was not a very artsy school. So in one way, my draftsmanship or kind of regressed a bit, but at the same time, I think it forced me into a creative space, being like the only person doing this. I did this thing. Well, the story I tell a lot is about, in the dorm, I invented bathroom comics, and that was taping an 11 by 17 sheet up in the bathroom and just adding to this story every time I was in there. And so my audience was people coming in to use that bathroom, and my pay for that job was hearing laughter coming from the bathroom, right? Because the story got more and more bizarre as it went on, and like, my favorite hooded sweatshirt was one of the characters in the story, and it was so crazy, but it was a good learning. Like, it felt so much like a waste of time, or just like blowing off steam or whatever it was, but it ended up being a really good learning experience. Just making these weird comics and entertaining people like right there. So that was fun. And then, but I did do some art training after college, learning, actually somebody gave me the manual to Photoshop. Towards the end of my time at that college, one of the people who worked there was like, "You should learn Photoshop." So my inroad there was just having the key to this office at night, from where the school's news mailing list stuff came out, and this manual for like photo, it was probably like Photoshop 2, like a really early version of Photoshop, and just going through it and doing all these exercises in the manual and learning that. That was one side of the grounding. And then the other was, years later, after I'd been doing some just like freelance design and freelance illustration stuff, I was able to take a year and go to Italy and study painting. So that was a really good experience. That kind of like really, hard to explain what it did. It really helped me like get a sense of like seeing and getting that image down. That was good. And do, like, I sort of built myself a little art history course while I was doing that, and kind of merged those two things. So yeah.
The first material that I'm aware that you did comics wise was In Flight. Is that
that would probably be
right?
those were my first printed comic stories, I think. Really. And like outside of school newspapers and stuff like that. So that was really exciting. That I owe most of my comics journey to Kazu Kibuishi, who kind of got us all together in the early days on message boards. And it was like, Raina Telgemeier and Vera Brosgol and all of us. We were all posting our stuff, sharing our work. And then it was like, well, let's make a book. And so I did a few flight stories, and we all still run across each other and share stuff and keep up with what we're all doing. And that's been a tremendous, that was my finding your tribe moment. So that was just that was the gift that keeps on giving, really.
And how did you find that tribe initially? How did you get to those
I
messages?
don't remember.
You don't remember? Okay.
I
Yeah.
don't remember.
Yeah.
I think it was okay. Well, early on there was Shane Glein's drawing board.
Yeah.
Was one that so probably just poking around on the internet, I found the Shane Glein's drawing board message boards. Started posting my work to there. Somehow drifted over to the flight message boards. Started making, and then like I don't even remember making internet friends, and then yeah.
Because I feel like, and I could be wrong with my remembering of timings on this, but I feel like most of the people in particularly the first 2 volumes of Flight were people who had already been published in multiple cases.
Yeah, and they were more heavily part of the like the mini comics community and the convention scene and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And I was not able to do that and had never been. And so I was always a little bit envious when I'd see or people talking about conventions and stuff like this and be like, oh, I wish I could go to those. And so it did also felt like a lot of them already knew each other and stuff like that. But no, yeah, it's just like but it was also just like a lot of interaction, a lot of online interaction. It was also early days, so there weren't as many of us, I think.
Sure.
And yeah, so when they started putting a book together, there was like, oh, you should. Cassie just messaged me and was like, oh, you should do a story for this. Okay.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like what you had been doing before, though, was primarily strips. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I had like, I mean, during the day, there was a time period where I was like illustrating textbooks, actually, and just doing like whatever freelance work came my way. And then online, Kazu had been doing his Copper comics, and he had been talking about how, his reasoning behind that was not just because it's a good thing to do. It was to like, or my memory of his reasoning for it is to tell a story in one page, right? Like sort of a learning like experience or a comics workout in a way. And so I was like, wow, I'm going to try to do that. And so I I had done like some Zeta the Space Girl stuff before, but I sort of was like, I'll just do that with the Zeta comics, try to make, and I actually couldn't do it. They would always bleed over into 2 or 3 pages or something like this. But that's why I started doing web comics with that. And but the Flight comics weren't Zeta. They were just like weird ideas that I'd had.
So I'm just sort of curious of that sort of evolution from going to single illustrations or doing strips to doing longer form stories. Because it seems like they're very different muscles to me.
For sure. And I'm shocked that, like I said, it was early days. I'm shocked that that in a sense I was handed a book contract for a long form comic, having never produced anything like that before. Like maybe like my print work 10 pages, right? 12 maybe. And it was a particular moment in time when Scholastic had picked up Bone and suddenly there was a call for this stuff, and I was getting inquiries from small presses, which I don't even remember which ones, about the Zeta books. And then I asked Kazu about it and ended up hooked up with my agent. And First Second was also just kind of new on the field.
Yeah.
And did I emailed them? I put together a pitch for the book, and they were like, yeah. And that's I think I was maybe well spoken in my emails, and had a freelance career to speak of. But I had definitely never done that before. And it took me a long time to figure even after signing it up, it took me a long time to figure out the book, to kind of break the story. And I had signed on for 2 books, and I got really, really lost with the second Zeta book. I was like, I hit a point where I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I should probably give back the advance and quit. I was just completely lost. But again, with both those books, I got really good. I had those people I could call and say, like, I'm stuck here. What do I do? With the Zeta, for the first Zeta book, I remember it was Keen Sue, who, did Jellaby and all this.
Yep.
And he was great. And I showed him like the thumbnails for the book that I'd been working on, and it had all this kind of preamble before they, all about their Zeta and Joseph, the 2 kid leads of this story. Yeah. You're getting all this information about him, and Keen was like, well, I mean, it's a space story, right? And yeah. And he's like, you should get him out to space like as soon as you can. Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, you're right. And so just like I cut all the pre-space stuff down to, I don't know how many pages it is, but it's like five pages before they're out in their way.
Yeah.
That changed everything for that story. So part of those books were the contract, but having a contract itself is sort of like burning the bridge behind you. So it's like, if you would have quit, guess what? You can't.
Yeah.
So you just have to find a way through it by going forward, and also having, that community that I could call out to and say like, hey, I'm really stuck. Can we talk about this? Okay. Yeah. That was super helpful. And then from there, it was just like, I don't know, my brain was hooked on story itself, and kind of never looked back from there.
Yeah. Yeah. I it's always interesting to me, sort of these 2 parallel paths that have developed, the direct market periodical 22-page pamphlet that then gets collected into a book versus doing a book from the jump.
Yeah.
Like they're structurally, they're very, very different things.
Yeah. I feel like TV and movies, really, right? Like the pamphlets are like, oh, I've signed on to do a season of this show. Yeah. And then the season gets collected. And then the books feel a little bit more like, okay, we're shooting a movie here. Go.
Yeah. And you said that you hadn't done minis or anything like that, so you really weren't.
Yeah, not really. I had done those few flight stories, and those were short. But yeah, I never had done the minis. So yeah, I didn't have a ton of work to show. Yeah. But it worked out.
Yeah. No, that's cool. What were you reading comics as a kid, as a young adult? What would you say was the stuff that really touched you and made you think, I could do this. I could make a career out of this.
I mean, well, okay. So early on, I'm old enough that I wanted to be a newspaper cartoonist. And being from the Midwest, even if I wasn't like intellectually aware of it, I think I was culturally aware of the fact that like towns had newspapers. And the Billy Ireland Museum in Columbus is sort of based on that idea that like a town could have a cartoonist, for the newspaper who did maybe many different design jobs, but one of them might be to make that city's comics. And that felt like a very like turn of the century, maybe interwar peace kind of time, like idea of prosperity, like you could be a local cartoonist. And then, so of course, then growing up with Calvin and Hobbes and Garfield, like so many people my age remember going to Scholastic book fairs, getting the long Garfield books, which were genius to print them in that long format, right? Like Calvin and Hobbes felt more like, they felt different. They felt more like books. I really like the idea of the strips collected the way they did. So that maybe was the beginning. And then, again, being from Indiana, I wrote to Jim Davis at one point, and he responded to my letter, and I was like, wow. Oh, this is a real guy. Like 12-year-old Ben realized, hey, a real person makes Garfield, and just a little seed in your brain, maybe you could do that too. Then there's like ElfQuest. I was super into ElfQuest, and that was the first like epic long form story. Read a lot of really like all the 90s stuff, like Todd McFarlane's run on Spider-Man, Rob
That,
Liefeld's Spider-Man stuff, and then
that almost surprises me. Just
90s X-Men.
Looking at your work, I don't see any of those influences at all.
Well, that's because of Jim Henson, really.
Yeah.
And so the two other things that were going on at the time was, I had a cousin who took me to see The Dark Crystal when I was like 5 or something, and I remember we had to leave the theater because I was scared, but I dreamed about the Skeksis castle from The Dark Crystal. Like, it would pop up in my dreams for years and stuff afterwards. So that whole sense where the Jim Henson work and worlds vacillate between dark and light really climbed into my brain. And then that plus like there were like, our library had like collections of like Barry Windsor Smith's
Nice.
work and stuff like this. So I like going through even the art collection, we had a really good library system. And being able to find some stuff like that in the library system, I think, as much as I liked, Jim Lee's X-Men and stuff like this, those things got their hooks into me like more, I would think.
Yeah.
So definitely that. And then just like, I don't ever remember a time not being a nut for like the Italian Renaissance. Those guys. So that's always been part of my DNA. A bit. So
yeah. Were you in a big city, in a small town? What was your?
It was Lafayette, Indiana. So it's a small city.
Okay.
And it's where Purdue University is. So so my dad worked in the campus planning offices for Purdue as an architect.
Yeah.
So having the university nearby was really special. I didn't realize it. I didn't think it was special at the time. It's not very artsy school. It's an engineering school, really. But I think it had a big effect on our family. And we were also part of the Society for Creative Anachronism for a few years.
Well, there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, everything dropped off here for a second.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, it's all good. I heard almost all of your answer, but,
okay.
but the video went away. It's all good. We're fine. Obviously ElfQuest, Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man, you had to have a comic shop to find those, yeah?
Yeah. We did. There were ElfQuest was at a shop that was a mix of a used bookstore and a comics shop, which I would like actually get on my like 80s style like BMX bike and pedal up to the comics shop blocks away. It's like that's one of the things where I'm like, wow, times were really different because my parents just let me ride off to some weird used bookshop in a strip mall miles away, pour through the stacks. And ElfQuest was also fun because I was picking up the Marvel reprints and they would never have them all.
Right.
So I'd go from issue like 22 to issue 25.
Yeah.
And for years I'd be like, what happened between? Will I ever know? I don't know,
Right.
Because it was only me taking my $1.50 up to the place and looking for these old comics. And then in high school, there was a Castle Comics, which was just down the road from us, which I'd pop into from time to time. But that's more when like that run of like Nightwing was out. Like that first run of Nightwing where like the first time they came up with like, oh, he moves to Bloodhaven and gets an apartment and is a cool guy there. I remember looking for those at that comics shop. And it's still there. I'm really glad to see that. Every time I visit my town, I try to pop into Castle Comics again. So
Very good. I love that. I love that. So let's talk a little bit about things.
Yeah.
Where did it come from? How what was your motivation to pitch this particular book, especially coming off of Zeta?
Yeah.
Because they couldn't be more different.
They could not. Yeah, I was really drawn to an underworld story. It's hard for me to remember where this one's a little mysterious in the where it came from. Milo. So I had 2 books out this year, and one was Things in the Basement. The other was this Reynard the Fox book, which is a bit of a mix. It's a sort of an adult picture book. It's a mix of prose and illustrations. And I had forgotten almost until the books were coming out that Milo and Reynard had been together in a story before, which was really strange. But it's Comic Squad Detention, an anthology put together by Jarek Krasaska. And he was like, "Do you want to do this story?" Yeah, sure. And I did this story where this kid Milo was in detention, and he kind of ends up going on this fantasy quest, which is, you're never sure if it's imaginary or real. And along this quest, he meets very briefly meets up with this with Reynard the Fox, and Reynard teaches him some magic, and then they part ways again. And I had just forgotten completely about that. I knew I wanted to do another story with Milo, but I had somehow forgotten that Reynard was also in that story. And now those they kind of went separate ways in real life, and now both their books are there and separate. But otherwise, I just needed to channel a lot of underworld story stuff into one place. And I don't know if I consciously was like, I'm going to write a book, or just it feels like it sort of just grew in my sketchbooks. And like I said, it is a bit like walking around in my brain. I was like, the house in the first opening page spread. That's the house that I grew up in and lived until I was like 13. That's the house that I would pedal out from to go to the comics shop. A lot of like that basement, the basement stairs. Those are those same basement stairs, right? Like, so it's a lot of stuff feels like a lot of stuff from my own life that just been reading a lot of. I'm really appreciating Ursula Le Guin's carrier bag theory of fiction essay, where she's asking the question, like, there's this, like, the story structure of The Hunt, where you go out and you have this great thing and you bring back, or thinking of stories as a place to put things. And this story felt more like a carrier bag story. Like, there's a narrative, and there's there's a journey down and a journey back up, and but within that narrative, it felt like there was a place to put lots of different things that I was interested in. A little bit more Alice in Wonderland like.
Sure.
I think there's not there's no question about, you're not supposed to question, like, oh, is this really happening? Is this not happening? But what about the time period that he's gone?
Right.
So yeah. But it's hard to, unlike a lot of stories, it's hard for me to like find out like where the narrative came from.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that you set it in your childhood house, because it from what you're describing of your relationship with your parents, it's nothing like Milo's relationship with his mom, where
Right,
he feels alone and he's trying to find something. It doesn't sound like that was something that you went through at all.
No, not so much. Not so much.
Yeah. And so where do you think those elements came from?
Well, okay, maybe I say not so much, but I do feel like I guess I do feel a kinship with Milo, and like in a little bit of the so I had just 2 younger sisters, which was delightful and everything, but I do think like I was kind of a solitary wanderer I really liked that. I liked exploring the old house, or exploring wherever I was, and not really running with a pack as much.
Yeah.
So that kind of worked. Yeah.
Was it that you wanted just to do something very different than Zeta?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's there's a certain kind of because there's Zeta and then there's the Mighty Jack books
Yep.
and then there's the big crossover and there
Yep.
and you know those are very high adventure
Yep.
um and you know doing so that yeah altogether like 6 of those was was a lot. And I mean I like it's hard getting letters from kids asking, you know, is there going to be another Zeta book? Is there going to be another Jack book? Because I think like I definitely did want or do continue to want to take a step back from that kind of story.
Mm-hmm.
I will say the Things in the Basement conceptually began life as a bit of a follow up to Little Robot, which was which felt a little bit more personal, and also was, but it's so much thinner and or so much shorter. But I wanted to try again to do something that was in the space where, let's see, very beginning readers could read this book without words at all, and then the words would add another layer. It really struck me when my eldest daughter, who when she was learning to read, she got a hold of our Calvin and Hobbes books, and it just really clicked with me when clicked with me that she first would tell us the funny things Calvin did, and then later started to tell us the funny things Calvin said. And it was like, oh, she's reading these visually first, and then the words. But Calvin can be a little wordy, and I wanted to do like so. Little Robot was thought of as something where you could read the whole thing without the words at all.
Yeah.
This did not work out that way. It got bigger in the telling, which was fine and great. And it allowed itself to be something bigger and maybe a little stranger. And so it's very much where my creative juices were drawn to then. And yeah, I think I'm just trying to travel further afield, see what can be done. That's why, like the Reynard book, also was a product of. Well, that was also kind of my what would I call the pandemic project in a way, because I was posting those live to Instagram for a while, which was fun, a good experience. But that was another one where it was like. It felt very conversation with myself-y.
Yeah.
So both these works, I think, have that in common, where you're always telling with the audience. You know, it's always this relationship between you and the audience. But like in these 2 books, the storytelling itself just felt a lot like kind of holding examination, holding is like it's not an allegory of my life. It's just like just holding a lot of that at bay and letting a lot of the imagery and the ideas just kind of seep in. And letting the characters, like Reynard, lurked around in my sketchbooks for a couple of years before he had a story, right? And that's felt like an interesting part of the process, like letting things show up in your sketchbook. And you know, like it feels very mystical to say that, like that you're letting the characters tell you the story, or that there's something else guiding your way, but it's not. It's really just like keeping it subconscious for long enough, because your brain's going to be ticking over these things. And sometimes the longer I don't know, it's not prescriptive, but for me personally, I've been noticing that the longer that I'm getting a lot out of letting things percolate subconsciously for a longer period of time before I start working on them consciously. Right.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. So as an author who's got 7, 8 books, whatever it is, all have been relatively successful. I mean, I would say Zeta is actually kind of huge. What's the pitching like for a new book? Do you no, I mean, but what I mean is do you have to put together the same kind of formal proposal that you would have made for Jack or for Zeta back in the day, or do your publishers and editors know you and trust you that you just have to give them kind of a log line?
Little, I think it depends on how far afield the book is. The books, the 2 books that I'm pitching right now, are enough of a diversion from, Things in the Basement's pitch was not very big, or it was not very extensive, right? It was like, here's some here are the characters, here's my idea for the story, that there it is, right? Here's a couple pieces of art. I don't think there were no finished pages in that pitch.
Yeah.
Little Robot was similar, except I had done all these Little Robot comic strips, just like one of the last. Well, it sprang just from doing these to blow off steam. When I was juggling lots of different projects, I'd be like, "Fine, I'm drawing a Little Robot comic now, run," and putting them online and letting people, like, they were me getting back to comic strip kind of format or ideas. So I had those. So I had the Little Robot kind of there, but really that pitch also was very light. So if it's something like that, yeah, I there's not a ton to it, but the ones I think I'm giving more now for the next couple books, because they are, because I'm wandering away a little bit, or like I'm wandering a little further out, and they're different enough, more or less nonfiction. So I, yeah, in that case, I'm having to explain a little more, what I'm up to, and it's also because so I did the another thing I did this past year was a very short Hawkeye story for a Marvel anthology, which just came out a couple days ago. I think it finally came out. It's called Marvel Super Stories, and it's they let a bunch of people with kidlit reputations just do their take on a character, and the instruction was like, it's 6 pages and you want to kind of get to the heart of what this character is about.
Sure.
And my agent was like, they were asking about this, do you want to do it? And I was like, if it's Hawkeye, yes. If I could do Hawkeye, yes. Otherwise I'm not interested. And she was like, and it's like, I was laughing because nobody else wants to really do Hawkeye. It's like, yeah, the Archers. Why did I bring that up? Boy, why did I go on that?
I don't know. I was being entertained by you.
Yes, yeah. But I was on pitching. Boy, I forget. Oh, I know why it was. Working with a different set of people, right? Like, so pitching, how much do I need to give them? I really do. It is like, it's like 13 books, and they've all been Macmillan mostly first, second, right? And I realized in doing this other book, this was like Abrams doing this Marvel stuff. I was working with all these editors. I've never talked to them before. And I just realized that the extent to which I've worked with some of the same people for so long that I have like a shorthand, or like how much I have stopped saying, because it's like, what I'm talking, you already know. Yeah. And then these people like I'd be like, oh, I actually have to explain what I'm thinking, like I actually have to say it.
Yeah. And so does that mean that your pitch for this Hawkeye story was longer than your pitch for Things?
No, it was just more along the lines of like, my thumbnails would be really rough, and I just little bits of communication where I would realize that, like, I would say that to my editor, my regular editor, and she'd be like, oh, I know what Ben means. And with the Hawkeye thing, like, just, well, yeah, I tightened up the thumbnails more so they'd be legible and stuff like this, stuff like that. And so that's the other thing of pitching, like, since I've mostly been in the same, with the same crew, I think, like, in that sense, I'm a known quantity for them.
Which was kind of what my original question was kind of trying to get at, was in terms of the structure of pitches. Because, a lot of the people I talk to, particularly for the kids club, are brand new authors
Sure.
who are fresh out of their MBA program or whatever, or MFA, I guess, program. And this is like the first thing they've done, and so it's a very different pitch, I think, than someone who's shall we say, a veteran, who's got a longer thing. I'm always curious about going from that pitch where you've got, let's call it 4 or 5 pages maybe of sort of here's the structure of it, to a 225 page book.
Yeah.
Like what's the steps for you? Because one of the things I love about comics is that almost everybody has a different method of working.
Yeah.
Some people script it out all the way through. Some people literally just start drawing and sees what happens. So where are you kind of in that creative spectrum?
So that's a good one. I do an outline, and I call it an outline, but it is sort of like it's sort of like a written document of me. It's as if I have seen a movie and am telling you not about the movie, but telling you everything that happened in the movie. Like, but it could be like, oh, and then the character went down this, hill, and at the bottom of the hill there was a troll, and then the troll said this. But it doesn't have to be. It's not a script in terms of troll dialogue. The troll said it was going to, stomp on this character unless the character went to get this goose. And I will just kind of describe every bit of the thing, and then I'll go back through that and just eyeball how many pages this roughly broken up in the scenes, right? Like in this scene, and then I'll roughly eyeball that and be like, okay, that's 5 pages, that's 8 pages, this one's 10 pages, 10 to 15, or maybe I'll write, and then I'll add all that up and get a sense of how long that book is there. Then I'll just I will fine tune that document a lot, but no written dialogue. Or very little written dialogue, only like key moments. But maybe a description of a conversation that happens. And then, so this is like real production time. So then that's a document that's sort of a living document that gets looked at, rewritten, fine-tuned. At the same time, I'll have a notebook, or a sketchbook really. And that's where like a lot of visual development's going on. You draw creatures over and over, draw characters over and over, until you look at the character and you're like, oh, that's that there they are. I found it. And at that point, those two things sort of come together, and that's when it's thumbnail time. And
so in those 2 pre-thumbnail stages, is this mostly for you, or is your editor involved in this at all? Are you showing this to other people? Are you showing it to your wife or your kids?
Yeah. That's a good one. I'll tell the story to my family. My famous story about that would be the 3rd Zeta book. I came in and I was like, okay, I've got the story, and I started telling it to them. And we were gonna make like pizzas that night, like homemade, it's pizza making night. Oh, great! And everybody wanted to not dig into the pizzas until they were like, no, finish. And I was like, okay, that was my sort of key that I broke the story. But with the document, like I will tell it to my editor. We'll kind of go through it. But really the main one is thumbnails. Like I keep Callista pretty much up to date on where the story is, what else is going on. But once it, like sitting down and doing the thumbnails, that feels like writing the draft. And when you get done with that, then I either scan or just snap pictures of all the thumbnails. And the thumbnails are like very small. Let me show you. Thumbnail pages, like just on copy paper.
Okay.
And they would go like, just do this really fast. So thumbnails would look like this. I start there, that I draw the same box every time, and then I'll put like, okay, this is page 23 and 24. 23 and 24.
Yep.
And then I will just draw the, okay, this will go like that. And then these will be full of pictures that are not much more complicated than this. I mean, they'll have figures on them and stuff, right? And then I'll just do this. Then along the side, we'll have the
dialogue
that corresponds with the corresponding panel.
Sure.
And then I will just kind of scan this part and then put that into a PDF. And then I send that to my editor. And it's completely unreadable. So we then get on a long phone call. And, we go through each page. And I'm like, in this panel, you can see we're looking down from above, and if so, and this character says such and such.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, next panel says that. And then I basically just tell her the story, and then we chat about it. And she's usually got some good feedback. And also, just in the telling, you can see things. Clean up the thumbnails, and then it feels like it's done at that point.
Yeah.
Feels like the story's done, and which makes doing the finished pages a really wonderful exercise of illustration.
Yeah,
where you're less emotionally fraught.
Yeah, sure.
And you can actually at that point you can put on podcasts, you can listen to loud music, you can just sort of let yourself go, and it's more of a physical challenge than how many pages can I get done a day? Can I actually do this?
You did those really fast for us, so I may have this a little wrong, but it sounds to me as though you're in the thumbnail stage, you're worrying more about pacing than about gesture. Is that right?
Yeah. Pacing, gesture, camera angles.
Okay.
All of that, just how it reads. First panel on the left-hand side, last panel on the right-hand side of the page. What keeps you turn the pages?
I was gonna ask you about the page turn and
we'll think about page turns. Pacing is a big one. Like panel, turn the page, big spreads, all this stuff, right? That's where you're designing it sort of as a book.
And are those decisions still active decisions for you, or have you internalized it enough at this point that you just kind of naturally know where to put the page turn and like you don't have to think about it as much, if that makes sense as a question?
Yeah, that does. I think yes, I've done it enough that I think less about it, but also therein lies a danger of falling into patterns, and then making it boring for both yourself and your reader.
Right.
So that's again a thing you have to break out of. There's this idea in painting that kind of shines a light on, because you get into patterns of thought, you get into patterns of seeing, so much of life seems to be like acknowledging how much you coast, visually, and everything you're doing, right? And so sometimes when we were painting, you're doing this figure painting, you're actually you've got your model and your canvas set up, and you're really trying to transfer this image over, and you think it looks right, and then one of the tools you've got your palette and your paints and everything. One of your tools is a little hand mirror, and you look in the mirror and you see everything you've been doing in reverse, compared to the model. Also, you're also seeing the model in the mirror reverse, and you're like, oh my gosh, so many janky parts of this, so many places where it's not what I thought I was seeing, and it's because your eyes just correcting it for you.
Sure.
Like your brain just makes corrections and takes shortcuts just for you. You just don't realize it's happening, and so I think a lot of that happens even in thumbnailing. If you've done it 10 times or whatever, you're like, oh, your character says what, and that makes you want to turn the page. No, it can be more interesting, so there's a good and bad side to having done it many times.
If you had to guess at how long the thumbnailing of things took, what would it be?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
It's hard
That's
to
why I
say.
said a guess.
Yeah. Oh gosh. I'm gonna say less than most books. I'm gonna say a month, 6
Wow.
weeks. I'm gonna say 6 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Does that seem long or does that seem short?
No, that seems really short to me, actually,
Okay.
because 6 weeks, 225 pages. I mean, you're doing 10 or 12 pages a day in thumbnails. Then at that point,
Yeah,
maybe
10
not
pages a
quite
day
that
would
much, but
10
you know,
pages a day would be good. Yeah.
yeah,
10
yeah,
pages a day would be nice. I would like that. Yeah.
yeah. Because
Um,
I definitely talk to people who are like, yeah, no, I thumbnail maybe 2 pages a day.
okay. But they're probably really beautiful thumbnails. Like my
Yeah,
thumbnails,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
woo.
Right. Well, that's always the difference, right? Because some people do really incredibly detailed thumbnails.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen, say, Jeffrey Brown's thumbnails.
No, no.
You could shoot from them. You could
Sure.
just blow them up, and it would be a comic. And
Yeah.
then he
Yeah.
redraws it again. It's kind of crazy to me, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've gotten on group calls where we're going over, you know, really well-known comics artists' work in thumbnail stage to just like chat about it and stuff like
Yeah,
that. And I'm always like, oh, this is really readable. This
yeah,
is great. And I'm just like, I just can't be bothered to make it anywhere. Like when I'm doing them, I'm like doing them so that they will be readable to me
yep,
and the bare minimum of readability to me, right?
yep.
And then secondarily for my editor who's worked with me long enough that I can walk her through it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So yeah, like a speed in the thumbnail stage is good because it also keeps you moving. It also keeps you moving
Sure.
the camera. Like it really does feel like movie stuff. Like, okay, keep moving the camera. Let's go.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And then
yeah.
when you start on the pencils, what's your production rate like there?
Let's see. I shoot for, I think, so like the Zeta and the Jack books, probably like 4 pages a day of inks,
Wow,
pencils and
still,
inks.
wow.
Yeah, they seem a little sketchy to me now. Like
Uh-huh.
I want to be able to slow down.
Uh-huh.
I have this like part of it's a compulsion to keep working, but part of it's also just like the idea that like, hey, I got a family. Let's get this book going.
Yeah.
You know, but I would like to take longer. I would like to force myself to take longer on individual pages and make them a little nicer.
No, I'm
happy with.
that's like nearly Jack Kirby speed. So you know, in my mind, that's like, wow, you're just booming them out there, man.
Yeah. And things in the basement, I'm happy with because so the like the Jack and the Zeta books are just like the original art feels a little bit chintzy to me because it's on laser printer paper, so it's like but this was the first book I did on Bristol board and the instead of inks it was like ebony pencil shades, and that was really fun, and that feels like I've got a little bit something more substantially artistic at the end of it. Because I've been one of the things that's been really rewarding about doing the picture books, like the Julia's House books and Nobody Likes a Goblin, those are ink and watercolor.
Yeah.
And so the final art, like, well, it's like this, like, right, like that's a spread from Julia's House, and it's and like that one up there is, and so and those were just like, I'm very proud because those were just like straight scanned, and that's what's in the book, like no digital correcting or anything like that.
So and I know we're really rapidly running out of time here. You do the pencils. Are you inking at the same time, or are you handing these pages over to Zach to do the coloring?
So no, so Things in the Basement is just pencil. It's like ink this pencil. I don't know.
I see. Okay.
I don't know if I did how much underdrawing I did for that. But then for the Zeta and Jack books, I'll do pencils and inks all in a go. Like I'll do like I just like make a page. So lay out the page. You do the like now I use a colored pencil for the underneath lines, ink over that. That page is done, and the next one. So, yeah, some people would. I would lose track if I penciled and then inked. I would.
Sure.
I like to go straight from the pencils.
Next week I'm talking to Dan Clowes, and Dan Clowes does like a 300-page book, and he goes through and he pencils the entire thing.
Whoa!
He letters the entire thing. He inks the entire thing from page 1 to page last in order.
Incredible.
Which I don't understand. I mean, my brain cannot process how that's done.
No, me neither.
But it works for him, right? Like, you know, and that's sort of the beauty about comics. So you're on things you were only doing pencils, then handing it to Zach.
Mm-hmm.
Did you give him notes on each page, what you wanted him to do, or did you just go, yeah, man, it's all yours?
We talked very generally about how the colors would go. He kind of came up with the shifting monochrome idea. We're really good buddies, so I was mostly like, Zach, just go for it.
Yeah.
And we also both like some of the old German expressionist silent films, where that's where partly where the shifting monochrome idea came from, right? Because it's a black and white movie, but they would put just a minute, Z. They would put those different colored lenses over it.
Yeah.
So maybe one scene would be like bluish and one scene would be pink. So kind of make it a little bit look like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I was just like, go for it, Zach, and I feel like he knocked it out of the park.
Nice. And when he turned the pages in, did you have notes, or were you just like, no, this is great the way that it is?
I feel like there were just a few places where because once we did a round of like test pages.
Yeah, sure.
And that was more like, oh no, like this character is always more shifting towards this color. This is the color of this guy's shirt, even if the whole lighting changes and all this stuff. But for the most part, I feel like the notes I gave him, I think at the end were super minimal.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that was a pretty easy process on my end. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, let's wrap this up. I have a pair of questions that I always ask at the end. One of them is there anything else you want to plug? Obviously, Renard is also out. Can you talk about your next couple of books after that, or are you still too early in the contract process to be able
probably
to talk
too early in the process to talk about that? I will say two things. One, I have a picture book, which is the first piece of first prose thing I've done for somebody else to illustrate. So this is a picture book that will be illustrated by Landis Blair. It's about a little caterpillar, and that's coming out. That got bumped to 25, so it's still ways off, but it's being illustrated now. So that's exciting. And then the next time, one of the things I'm working on. Oh, I should hardly even talk about it.
Yeah, no, if you can, it's fine. I always like giving people an opportunity to plug future things. I
would say one of the things I'm working on now is a young adult period fantasy with notes of horror and romance.
Oh, nice!
So that's
very
something
nice
to sink my teeth into.
Very, very nice. Do you think you're going to go back to Milo and do what you sort of threaten at the end of the book, Things in the Attic?
Things in the Attic. I got a lot of notes for Things in the Attic. Kid asked that question the other day, and I did tell this young one that I think in my notes for Things in the Attic at this point, it's actually Milo's twin siblings who are a little older, Leo and Lucy, who will be going up into the attic.
Interesting. All right.
But we'll see. I don't know. It may be Milo again because I like him so much. He's a good.
Do you think that you could eventually do Things in the Garage, Things in the Shed?
Time will tell.
But
it does feel like there's a lot of room there. It does.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah, very good. All right. So and then as the wrap up question, again, this is the one that I ask absolutely everyone. As we've talked about, this is a series of interviews with cartoonists. We've got something close to 300 interviews up at this point. And so a lot of people watch this who want to make comics themselves and who don't necessarily know how to start, what to do. So I always like asking, what is the piece of advice that you would give to someone who wants to make comics but is unsure of themselves and their ability to do it? This can be a physical, practical thing. This can be a spiritual thing. This can be an emotional thing. But what would be the piece of advice that you would give to someone who is interested in doing this but just doesn't know what to do next?
I would say my thing. There's so many bits of advice you could give, right? So many bits of advice. But I have two things on my desk that I can show that I think is one of the things I tell. And this is not comic centric as much as it is creative practice in general, right? Here are two sketchbooks on my desk. One is Strathmore 120 sheet recycled paper sketchbook. The other is one of these pretty glittery paper blank sketchbooks that you find in the nice sections of bookstores. Buy this one is my note for everyone. Once in a while I get one of these and I always feel, not one of these specifically, but a pretty sketchbook, and you feel that everything in it has to look good. That's not good, because then you won't fill it up. What a sketchbook is for, in my philosophy, is it's cheap material that you don't have to feel precious about, like scribbly drawings, and it is to catch ideas as they fall out of your brain. And so that will get you in a practice of filling the sketchbooks, doing it every day. And that will invariably tick that needle of art forward, much better than having the fancy one. And like, this is something you can buy, and as you carry it out the store, you feel like an artist.
Sure.
Right. This is something you could spend a lot less money on and get a lot more paper and be an artist. Right.
I got you. I love it. I think that's really great, Ben. I want to thank you for taking the time and talking to us. I wish we had another.
Yeah, this was fun.
Because I feel like we're just getting started here.
Yeah.
You know, and when I looked at the clock and I'm like, oh, the hour's up. I'm like, how is the hour? This is like 10 minutes. We've only talked for 10 minutes. So,
well, next time
we'll do it with your next book. I got a couple of bits of business to do here. Stick just for 1 second till the end of the show. Ben, put me on a 1, please. Hey, you are sitting at home, you person, and you want something to read, and especially now that it's Halloween, spooky season, you want some good spooky comic that's smart and that is heart and is entertaining. Things in the Basement. You cannot go wrong with this. Ben's a great cartoonist. You're gonna love this. This is great stuff. So you do that, okay? Shows coming up next week, as I mentioned a couple times here. We've got Dan Clowes coming in for Monica. Dan is actually here live in person in the store, and we will have a studio audience, and it's going to be very cool. So that's next Sunday. And then next month's kids book, for all you kids at home, so you get your early warning, will be Shelley Frankenstein, Cow Piggy. So it's also a Halloween book, and I know we're in November, but you're getting it the first week of November, so it's pretty close to Halloween. So keep a lookout for that. I want to give a couple of thanks. I want to thank Jordan, my producer, for doing a bunch of backstage stuff that no one else sees. I want to thank Ben for running the show, doing the camera, all that great stuff. I want to thank my wonderful staff, Zoe, Kat, and Katie, because them being my staff and taking care of the store means I get to interview cartoonists. It's one of my favorite things to do. I want to thank every member of the club for being a member of the club. And I especially want to thank cartoonists, because if it wasn't for you, I couldn't do this. I wouldn't own a comic book store if people like Ben weren't making comics. And there's Ben right there. Ben, thank you for making comics. Thank you for making this book. And thank you so much for your time, my friend.
Thank you for having me. This was delightful.
Yeah, if you're ever in San Francisco, let me know. I'll
100%.
Yeah, we should do something. We've, in fact, to go back to something we were talking about earlier, or you mentioned earlier, we have a whole bathroom where all the cartoonists who have come into the store have drawn and added to the story. So we'd love you to come and do that too. So
I do
let me
love
know if
making
you're
bathroom
ever
comics.
in the area. Okay, man.
Will do. Will do.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everybody out there. We will see you next month. Well, next week and next month. Thank you for watching this episode of the Graphic Novel of the Month Club. If you enjoyed what you were watching, please subscribe and hit that bell up in the top corner. If you enjoyed the books that we're talking about and the creators that we're talking to, every month we pick a brand new book. The staff votes on it. It's a program that helps keep our store alive, and we'd love to have you as a member. You'll get a new book every month. Just follow that URL at the bottom of the screen.